This is my favorite intro.
Yeah, it's cool, this one, yeah?
Yeah. This is the Lazy Money Machine. We're all about, well, building passive income, lifestyle freedom, how to, plus all the other stuff that goes in between. My name is Graham Brown, joined by Eric. Eric, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, Graham. Thank you.
All right, some of the things we talk about on this podcast are books, because we're both avid readers of books. I want to bring up a book which I've recently picked up again, but I think it's a book which is so influential. It's especially in our area, which is lifestyle freedom. I want to go back to the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Great. Okay.
And if you've read our book, The Lazy Money Machine, you'll notice some of the themes in there have been sort of continuations and building upon what Tim Ferriss has already started. And you've got to go way back to 2007 or 2008 when Tim Ferriss published the 4-Hour Workweek. I want to pick a quote from the 4-Hour Workweek and I want to ask Eric what it means.
Okay.
Because we've used something very similar in our book. And Tim Ferriss says this: people don't want to be millionaires. They want to experience what they believe only millions can buy. What does that mean?
Okay. Yeah, so I think this is a very very good statement, because it makes you think, right? And it makes you think about the importance of money. And I think also the way that we talk about it in the book as well is that usually it's better. It's better to think, oh, I'll be happy when I have $1 million or $2 million or $3 million. That's an easy way to look at things. But it's much better, I think, to look at it that I'll be happy if I can do certain things, if I can afford to do certain things in life. Yeah. And then look at, okay, how much does that really cost? And the millionaire lifestyle is not costing you the millions that you think it might cost you. Maybe we talk a bit more about that today.
In the book, yeah. I mean, that millionaire lifestyle, you can have that for a lot less, can't you? I mean, it goes back to our last podcast. In the last podcast, we asked the question, the last episode, we asked, what if you could achieve your 10-year goals in the next 6 months? And it's similar with the millionaire lifestyle, isn't it? What if you could live that lifestyle without having to wait decades to get $1 million, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you need to think very broadly if you ask these questions about your lifestyle. It's, the kind of climate you would like to live in, the kind of activities you would like to do, the kind of luxury you would like to have around you. And once you start thinking about that, at least in my opinion, I mean, usually you don't end up with 20 race cars and 10 watches. You end up with different things. You end up with clean air. You end up with being able to go outdoors, being able to cycle to work. It could be a variety of things. But once you start specifying what your millionaire or your $1 million lifestyle looks like, very often you go beyond the material and you go into the experiences that we can have.
When you started out as a business owner, and I know your business grew very quickly and in some ways uncontrollably, you had the problem, a good problem of having too much revenues and growing too fast, right? Mm-hmm. So did you ever have that conversation with yourself or maybe with your wife or whatever, and you sat down and thought, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to sell this business and we want to sail off into the sunset and we're going to make X million and all that kind of stuff. Did you have that kind of conversation with yourself, dreaming up that millionaire lifestyle? Because for you, it was very realistic. It was going to happen, right, with your business.
Yeah, I was on a path whereby I basically would never have to work a day in my life anymore. So that all came to a screeching halt. It didn't happen exactly the way I planned it back then. But I think because it happened so fast, I wasn't really thinking about the consequences and about, okay, when I retire, I'm going to do this, that, and this. Where I was basically quite... I had my feet on the ground, I think, in this case. And I didn't, I never really changed a whole lot in my lifestyle when my income changed. I mean, I'm still, careful with what I spend on holidays and on traveling and on luxury. I don't buy many luxury items. So I sort of never thought, okay, I'm going to make the step up and buy the Ferrari or something like that. I never had that idea or plan.
Did you focus more on, even at a younger age, were you thinking about things like experiences and so on? Or
no, I think that comes with age in my case. I mean,
right.
Being in the rut of studying, learning, having a job, I think at that point I never really thought that through. But when I get a bit older, yes, definitely. And the one thing though that we did decide is that when money was available, we basically left for 6 months and went traveling. And I know you've done that, right? And that was, and that has completely screwed up everybody's mind, including my own. You know, now we're like, okay, what's the next thing we can do that is similar to this? You know. Just going away and traveling. We were for 6 months in Europe and in the US, and that homeschooling the kids. I mean, that's the kind of once in a lifetime experience that I would like to have a lot more of now.
Right. Yeah, and it goes back to that point about what happens if you could do it in the next 6 months, doesn't it? You know, we talk about this. We talk about this in the book.
Yeah.
There's that survey, isn't it? A Daily Mail survey, and they asked people, "What would you do if you won the lottery?" And 81% of people said, "Travel the world." But the interesting thing is you don't need to win the lottery to travel the world, right?
Yeah.
So it goes back to that. I don't know the exact quote, but there's a Bob Dylan quote somewhere. It's something like, if you give people what they want, it scares them. I don't know what it is. Somebody's going to pull me. A Bob Dylan fan listening to this podcast who better tell me, right? But, it's kind of, we dream of these things and we keep them as dreams because if somebody could give you that now, you'd run away. But you keep dreaming about these things because it keeps us in this comfort zone where we know that we'll never actually have to achieve these things, right? There'll always be a get out clause that, why didn't you, it's like when people talk about the millionaire lifestyle, well, why didn't you achieve that? I didn't have $1 million. Well, if somebody says to you, you don't need $1 million, you just need to get up and do this stuff, right?
Yeah, so true.
I think that's the scary part, isn't it? That, people realize actually you don't need to roll the dice on this and gamble on it. You can do it right now, but that's what scares people. It's not a fact that you have to have the money in the bank. It's just you have to have the willpower to get up and do this stuff, right? And I think that's what Tim Ferriss is talking about. People don't want to be millionaires, but they want what millions could buy or what they believe it could buy.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, especially like the 6 month trip that I've done, I've heard anybody that I speak to, almost without exception, says, "Oh, I wish I could do that." That's exactly the words that they say. Always they say that. So then my question to them is quite simple. First of all, if you really calculate what it costs you to travel for 6 months, and I did that in my case, I was able to get a discount on my school fees that I had to pay. That was my big expense. And if I wished, I could have rented out my house. Now, I didn't do that because I didn't want to rent out my house. But if the way I did it now, almost half of my expenses were covered because I didn't have to pay the school fees. And the other half I could have gotten back if I had rented out my house. It could have been a zero-sum game. It could have been a break-even thing for me. Now, then you talk about time, and that's the other consideration a lot of people have. Yeah, but I have a job. I said, okay, but if you're a contract worker, and a lot of expats here in Indonesia, they work for a couple of years here, a couple of years there. I said, why don't you negotiate the next time you are in this situation? Why don't you negotiate a 6 months break? I'll start my next job 6 months after I finish my previous job. You're certain of a new job. You just have 6 months that you need to cover. Make sure you have enough savings to cover the 6 months. You can do exactly what I did. So then I wish I could do that is something that, it's a question whereby I don't think enough thought is being given into what is actually possible.
Oh, that's the reason why. Well, one of the drivers why we set up that group, wasn't it? I mean, the Facebook group is because it allows people to know what is possible.
Yes.
Because unless you're surrounded by those people who are doing this stuff, you don't know what possible is. You just think what possible is what you get from the TV, right? So that's the point, isn't it? It's that, actually you can do that. You can do like Eric and fuck off for 6 months, right? But for most people, they think it's impossible. Well, no, I can't do that because everybody around me isn't doing that.
Yeah, or another consideration is, but what if the school results of my children go down? Basically, we set out. My second son was in his last year of elementary school, and then in the Dutch education system where he's at here, they have this final test, and this test is quite important because it determines sort of your grading or where you can end up in middle school levels and whatever. And we had that in the year that we left, and we basically said, look, we're just going to take the risk. My son is a pretty clever cookie. He could learn very well, and we said, look, I mean, if the consequence is that he's going to score a bit lower on his test, so be it. It's not the end of the world.
He won't though, will he? I mean, what you've given him. I mean, I've had a very similar experience where they say, "Oh, you can't do that. What about his education?"
Right.
And it's not. It's often, people who mean well. They say things like that because that is a natural concern, isn't it?
But in your case, your son is 13, I think, yeah.
Well, he's 11 now. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, he's 11.
Almost 12. Yeah.
But you've been moving around since he was a baby. So how have you been dealing with this?
Well, I think he's been in education all the time. There's a few breaks, obviously, 6 months here, 6 months there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can remember an incident and I think these are important conversations to have, isn't it? Because often you're on your own trying to deal with this.
Yeah.
And people will say, "Oh, you can't do that. What about his education?" And as I said, the people who say it mean well. They're not trying to hold you back because they're jealous. They're honestly concerned. And I think that, they say things like, "Oh, you can't do that. How's he going to do in this test?" and so on.
Yeah.
And especially with Asian cultures as well, where they're so focused on, traditional education. But I can remember an example where they would say, "Oh, well, he'll suffer. He'll be out of education for a few months. But, what's he going to do as an alternative? He's going to go to a museum." And I think in this case, we were snorkeling in Fiji, in the coral reefs of Fiji. And he was out there in these pristine coral reefs of Fiji, snorkeling with the family and seeing fish and, all that kind of stuff. And that week back at school, they were going to the aquarium. It's like, oh, there you go. Well, it just goes to show is what's going to be the best learning experience.
Yeah, right? And I think this is where we touch on a lot of people probably don't change their lifestyle because they are in an environment whereby everybody is in a certain rut, and to be the oddling jumping out and saying, "Look, I'm going to homeschool my kids, or I'm going to go travel, or I'm going to quit my job, or I'm going to buy a camper van and travel Europe," whatever it is, right? For you to be the odd one is a brave choice to make, and maybe not many people are brave enough to do it. That's maybe one of the reasons.
Well, I mean, bringing it back to the 4-hour work week, I mean, that's why I think our generation and all the generations that follow us have a debt, really, to people like Tim Ferriss. I mean, he wasn't the first by any means to do this, but I think what he did was plant a flag for all of those weirdos. And I count myself as one of them. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're now proud to wear that moniker as well. I think that we all did things differently, and Tim Ferriss was really the first person to write a book for us.
Yeah,
in the sense and say, okay, actually, it's okay. You can do this, and it can work out pretty damn well.
Yeah,
and in that respect, I mean, even though maybe his way of doing things will not suit everybody, which is fine. It was just the first attempt at that to say there is an alternative way of doing this, and doing this really means living your life. So I thought it was important to bring that up today, to bring up 4-hour work week, because this is a theme that I think is going to come up again and again, and it comes up again in our group, isn't it? People are asking, how can I live this lifestyle?
Yeah,
I think it's something that people are really fascinated by, right? And you don't have to be a 18 or 19-year-old kid out of college to do this. You can be a middle-aged guy like you and I, right, that make this happen.
I hope we reach a lot of kids out of college, because that's where I really want to plant the seeds, to be honest. Do this early in your life.
Taught this, right? I want to go into that, because you went and did a training session last weekend, right?
Yeah, that's right.
If we can just indulge a little bit, make this podcast a little bit longer. But you went and did that, and I know you love doing that.
Yeah.
How do these people react to these kind of messages?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I ran a course that was titled "How Not to Run Out of Money: Skills Not to Run Out of Money," and it was for an initiative here in Indonesia from a friend of mine called Limitless Campus. This Rene, he's trying to set up something whereby he teaches 19 to 35-year-old, millennials plus, additional skills besides academic skills to be more ready for life. That was really the purpose of the Limitless Campus. And I taught this course, and it was, for many people, was an eye opener, and usually in these courses there's like the simple things that are the most shocking for many, right? And yeah, these simple things are, spend less than you make. Okay, and then I go and dig in the group, how many of those people are actually spending less than they make, and then a whole bunch of hands go up. And then I ask, okay, for the guys that have their hands up, how many of you have a credit card debt? And then the guys with the credit card debt, they have been spending more than they're making, right? So it's like there were some of these eye-opening things, and for them, I think it was great to see that, like, the concepts of passive income versus active income, spending less than you make, investing your money wisely. It is actually not difficult to grasp for many, but it's just not material that people get exposed to. And when they get exposed to it, they go, yeah, it makes perfect sense, So, and they were all like, okay, what can I do next? Where can I invest? What can I do? Right? They were like, okay, let's go. Let's rock and roll.
How old were these people?
19 to 35. But I think most of them were way below 35, like in 20s, early 20s.
Okay. So I imagine a lot of these were, maybe on their first job. They're probably in debt.
Yeah,
etc.
Yeah, or at least living off a modest salary, but working really hard usually.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it, that these things aren't taught? I mean, how even things like credit cards. Okay, I mean, I don't know what it is in your country, but I think they can send credit cards to anybody 18 over. They can send you a credit card in the mail, right? And you can use it straight away.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I came up here too. I said, do you remember that credit card is the most expensive money you will ever borrow in your life? So I said, how much is this? How much interest is it per month? And they said, like, it's between 2% and 3% per month. I said, that's 36% a year.
Right.
Yeah. I said, that's the most compounded even. So it's probably more. The whiz kids under us here will be over 40%, and they go like, wow, I didn't realize that. It's the most expensive money you can ever borrow in your life.
Yeah.
They go, oh, wait a minute, this is not good. So
I remember, I mean, people were saying to me is that, okay, I want to buy stocks and shares.
Yeah.
I don't have any cash in the bank. Can I use my credit card? For fuck's sake. Like, it just goes to show, isn't it, how people think is that they think it's free money. To go and buy stocks and shares, you're going to be really lucky to find a stock that can return 40, 50% a year, guaranteed. Yeah. It doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't exist.
So you're borrowing, let's say you take $1,000 out on your credit card. I'm sure this is how those young people were thinking. Like, you can take $1,000 out on your credit card, put it into the stocks. You make all this money on the stocks, and you can pay back the credit card. And that's how people are thinking, right? And nobody has sat down with them and said, hey, look, this is the reality. The reality is, if you just pay back on your credit card the minimum amount, I think, whatever it is, it's like the 1 or 2% on the balance. I think somebody's worked this out, hasn't it? It takes you 2,000 years or something to pay it off. It's just, I don't know how it works out. Something silly like that, because the credit card companies have got people in the bind. They know that that's how it works out. They can make money out of you forever and a day.
Yeah. Because a lot of people won't pay their debts off, right?
Yeah.
They will always have a certain amount in debt on their cards, on their credit cards. So,
how did we get into this? We started talking about millionaires and experiences.
Yeah. So we got digressed a little bit maybe, but yeah, the lifestyle that you want is more important than the $1 million, and postponing it because you think you need $1 million is a bit silly. I think look at what you can do now. What lifestyle do you want, and what would you need to do that? That's the way to look at things, I think. Right.
And nobody teaches this stuff. I think that's what we're talking about. The basics. To achieve that, you need to be financially savvy, don't you? I think the only people that teach that kind of stuff, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, go and read it. And Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Workweek. I know Eric's big on the classics. I would put those two into the classics. Whether you really, like the tone of the books or whatever, I think the key messages of those books are very powerful. So that would be my recommendation today. I'm sure Eric's going to bring up a few more classics in coming podcasts that you absolutely must read. if you want to achieve lifestyle freedom. This is the Lazy Money Machine podcast with Graham Brown and Eric Ten Haver.